still remember the moment. My heart lurched out of my chest like I'd jumped off a cliff when my youngest burst through the market stall rows, tears streaming down her cheeks, calling my name in a voice so small I almost didn't recognize it. One second, she was off hunting for her favorite chocolate-covered marshmallows in that bustling weekend market. The next, she was cornered by a circle of 6 older women who looked at her like she'd betrayed the very earth she stood on. My eldest and I raced through the crowd, me cursing under my breath about those harpy church ladies, my daughter clutching half-paid bags of sweets, only to see them leaning in, faces twisted with that self-righteous fury that comes from believing you're on God's one and only side. I shoved my way in, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might explode. "Back off," I hissed. My eldest grabbed her sister's arm and practically yanked her toward the car, but I stayed, toes dug in the gravel, stomach twisting with anger. These women, once friendly nods at potluck dinners, were calling my 16-year-old unchristian, accusing her of abandoning her grandparents and ignoring the 2 boys her father had left behind. Those boys. My daughters hadn't asked to uncover their father's secret life, hadn't asked for the shock of discovering that the man they loved was living a double life until it collapsed around all of us. They didn't choose to be therapists' clients, trembling every time they heard a rumor or saw a phone light up. By the time the market manager asked us all to leave, after I'd told the women, probably too loudly, that if they cared so much about Christian duty, they could shove it up their hymnal pages, the damage was done. My eldest and I backed away, her arm around her sister trembling against her side. The vultures followed us all the way to the car before I floored the gas and tore out of the lot, tires spinning red dust into the summer air. We got home in silence. My 2 girls disappeared into their rooms. I settled on the couch with my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard, eyes stinging with rage and hurt. I messaged Mark, an elder in that church who'd always been kind to me. "Something happened at the market today. These women, you won't believe it." His reply came almost instantly. Shock, apology, promises to look into it. Then he dropped the bomb. My ex-mother-in-law had unleashed a full-blown smear campaign on the church's Facebook group. A 4-page testimonial describing how cruel and vindictive my daughters and I were, how we'd stolen her inheritance, abandoned her grandsons, and left her alone and broken. I stared at the screen, reloading over and over, watching the comments pour in. Such betrayal. Where is her Christian mercy? Poor sweet old lady has no one left. Those girls deserve every bit of shame. My blood boiled. I thought of the messages my girls had received late at night, taunting them for being the reason their father died, calling them bastards. I thought of the photos I'd seen on his phone. My ex wrapping his arms around the woman he'd been carrying on with for years. The look on his parents' faces when they'd found out, but covered it up, thinking they were protecting their precious son's reputation. I thought of my daughters lying in their beds, tears dried but souls raw. I closed the laptop and didn't sleep that night. By morning, I had a plan, one that would leave no shred of doubt in anyone's mind about what really happened. I rounded up every text, every email, every photograph. His flirty texts at 2 a.m., the receipts from hotel stays, the messages from his parents praising him for doing what he needed to do. I even dug up the texts my ex-in-laws had sent to my daughters, telling them to be good sisters to their sweet baby brothers who'd lost their father, and to thank your mother for her sacrifice. The betrayal cut me like a blade. This was going to end today. I spent the next afternoon at the print shop, watching the clerk roll her eyes as I ordered high-gloss prints on heavy cardstock, spiral-bound into little hymn book-style packets. The first photo inside each binder was of my ex and his other woman, mid-kiss in our living room, clear as day, skin tones contrasting so starkly, I almost laughed. Beneath it, in neat script, John's secret love. Next came scans of text chains, every flirtation, confession, promise of forever between my ex and her, and every vicious justification from his parents. Then the messages to my daughters, calling them illegitimate and cursed. I even included screenshots of my ex-Mill's Facebook post, the lie she'd woven to paint herself the victim. The shop smelled like fresh paper and ink. I felt like I was assembling a weapon. When the last binder clicked shut, I tucked it under my arm, paid, and walked out into the late afternoon sun. My pulse was steady, my voice calm as I told myself, "This is for the girls, for their peace, for the truth." Sunday morning, I slipped into the back of the church service with my girls beside me. The organ hummed, sunlight filtered through stained glass, and a hush fell over the congregation as Pastor Jennings lifted his hand. I clutched the binders under my cloak of a cardigan and waited for the right moment during the hymn distribution when no eyes were on the back counter. The little desk with hymnals and song sheets was always unguarded. I'd watched it for weeks. Today, it was my stage. It took less than a minute. I stacked the binders neatly, slides of glossy proof that the old guard had been lying to them all along. Then I slipped back to my seat. The service went on. Scripture readings, prayers, that long moment of silence they call communion reflection. My heart pounded like a drum, but I sat as still as a statue, eyes fixed on the pastor, waiting. After the final blessing, the sanctuary emptied in a rush of skirts and ties. My girls clung to me as we filed out. At first, everything seemed normal, soft greetings, the usual "see you next week." Then the whispers started. A gasp here, a pointed look there. I watched as Mrs. Caldwell, the very woman who'd cornered my youngest at the market, hurried past, face pale. Then Mrs. Nguyen, scrubbing at her blouse sleeve, glanced between me and the back corner. "Did you see?" Someone hissed under her breath. I felt tears prick my eyes, but not of sadness. Relief. All along, the church had been a fortress built on half-truths and favoritism. Today, those walls were cracking. Outside, I found Mark waiting near the exit, looking sheepish. I'm so sorry," he said, voice low. "You were right. I checked the group. They've seen the binders. Everyone's stunned." His eyes flicked to my girls, who stood tall, faces shining with cautious hope. "They want to know, do you have more?" I shook my head, smoothed a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "That's enough for one day." I slipped my arm through my eldest's and gave my youngest's shoulder a squeeze. Today, we'd reclaimed our story. Today, my girls would sleep a little easier, knowing the truth was out. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone tried to corner them, calling them unchristian, ungrateful, unloved, they'd remember this moment. When their mother took their pain and turned it into their shield, this was only the beginning. I can still feel the weight of those binders in my hands as I stepped out of the church into the warm spring afternoon. My daughters and I lingered by the front steps, watching faces stream past, some curious, some begrudging, some silently offering nods of respect. I reached down to smooth my youngest's hair. She looked at me, eyes bright with something I hadn't seen in weeks, relief. "You think they believe it now?" she asked, voice quiet. I squeezed her hand. "I do. They've seen the proof. There's no more hiding." My eldest, ever the practical one, scanned the lot for our car keys. Mom, what happens next? You didn't bring extra binders, did you? She teased, though I caught the slight tremor in her tone. She worried about repercussions, about more drama, more whispers, even retaliation. But I knew we had momentum now. We piled into the car, the engines hum a welcome comfort. On the drive home, we spotted a few of the church ladies hesitating at the gate, their eyes flicking toward us before they looked away. My heart fluttered, not with fear, but with satisfaction. For weeks, those same women had treated my children like criminals, prying into our lives and judging us. Now, they were the ones who felt exposed. At home, I made us lunch, turkey sandwiches, and fruit, and we retreated to the backyard. The air smelled of blooming lilacs. My eldest plopped down on the swing set, pushing her feet against the grass as she thought. My youngest munched watermelon, small drips of juice running down her chin. This feels weird, my youngest said between bites. Like, I should be upset it happened at church, but I'm just happy it's over. I know, I said, leaning against the fence. They made it personal, but you were brave. I'm proud of you. She smiled, shy but genuine, and I felt a warmth spread through me. My daughters had endured more cruelty in these past months than most kids their age could imagine. And yet here they were, smiling in the sunshine, a sense of normalcy finally seeping back in. That evening, I sat in my room scrolling through the church's private Facebook group. The binders had spread like wildfire. Photos of the scandalous packets, screenshots of shocked comments, even a short video of Pastor Jennings announcing he'd be addressing the congregation on Sunday. Some posts were sympathetic. I can't believe we were so blind. Others were defensive. She went too far by making this public. It was messy, but it was honest. I drafted a private message to Mark, thanking him for his initial support and asking him to encourage the pastor toward fairness. No more shunning, no more whispers. Before hitting send, I paused. This church had been our community for years. It had given my girls friends, and it had given me solace after his death. I didn't want to burn bridges completely. I just wanted the truth recognized. The next morning, I woke to an email from Pastor Jennings with the subject line, "A Sunday Reflection." My stomach knotted as I clicked it open. He began by acknowledging the hurt both sides felt, my daughters and me, and the in-laws. He confessed that the church's drive to protect its own had blinded many to the real pain involved, and that he had asked our family into his office before service for a private conversation. He extended an olive branch, a promise to offer counseling through the church, and a public apology to my daughters for the harassment they endured. I exhaled so hard, I thought my lungs might collapse. I looked over at my phone's screen. My girls unread their own texts, anticipation written all over their faces. By midday, we were sitting in Pastor Jennings's cozy office, sunlight pooling on the stained wood floor. The pastor clasped his hands, looking more solemn than I'd ever seen him. "I owe you both an apology," he said, voice gentle. "No child should be judged for their parents' sins. We failed you." My daughters shifted, exchanging glances. My eldest finally spoke up. "Thank you, Pastor. But why did this happen? Why did they think it was okay to harass us?" Pastor Jennings swallowed. Fear, anger, and a misplaced sense of duty. They believed they were defending God's honor and an elderly woman's virtue. "None of us asked what it cost you." Those words hung heavy in the room. I watched my youngest nod, tears shining in her eyes but a small smile forming. When we left the office, the three of us felt lighter, like stepping out into fresh air after being trapped underwater. That afternoon, my eldest suggested we celebrate with ice cream. She chose mint chocolate chip. Her sister insisted on cotton candy swirl. We laughed as the drippy cones threatened to topple over. It was a small victory, but after weeks of tension, it tasted like freedom. Later, as I loaded the dishwasher, I reflected on how far we'd come. From being cornered at a market stall to the pastor's office to cartwheeling joy in a tiny ice cream shop. I realized this story, our story, wasn't just about exposing lies or shaming the bullies. It was about reclaiming our dignity and reminding everyone that truth matters, even when it hurts. That night, I tucked my daughters into bed and held them longer than usual. "You're not just my children," I whispered. "You're warriors." My eldest smiled sleepily, my youngest yawned a giant yawn. As I turned off the light, I noticed something unusual. They didn't look scared anymore. They looked ready for whatever came next. Because of that binder stunt, there was talk of setting up a small committee in the church to address family disputes and prevent future harassment. I'd been invited to join, an opportunity to turn our trauma into service. I hesitated at first. Did I want to wade back into those church politics? But then I thought of the girls, of how much courage they'd shown. This was another step toward healing, not just for us, but for other families who might find themselves at the mercy of rumor and shame. The next morning, I drafted a brief note accepting the invitation. In it, I promised honesty, compassion, and discretion. I knew my ex-in-laws wouldn't be pleased, but they'd already fled the church, posting sad proclamations on their wall about the coldness of modern faith. Let them whine online. We were building something better here. I dropped the note off at the church office, pausing at the doorway to take it all in. The polished pews, the foyer with the coffee urn and donut platter, the familiar bulletin board plastered with flyers about bake sales and youth retreats. It felt different now, not a fortress of secrets, but a place where, with enough courage and truth, walls could come down. That afternoon, I called our lawyer to finalize some estate details, making sure the boys from my ex's affair were provided for, reviewing the will nuances so no one else could twist things again. It was tedious, but necessary. I glanced at my phone and saw a text from my ex-mother-in-law. "You'll regret this. God will judge you." I didn't reply. Instead, I deleted it and closed my eyes, breathing in the soft hum of the world outside, children laughing in the street, birds calling, life moving forward. When I joined my girls for dinner, they were practicing piano. Old hymns and new songs merged into a gentle melody. My eldest nailed a tricky chord progression. My youngest sang off-key but with gusto. I sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, jotting down ideas for the committee's first meeting. This was our next chapter, transforming pain into purpose, standing up for truth, and most importantly, showing my daughters they were worthy of love, respect, and unshakable dignity. And so, as I listened to their music, I realized the binders had done more than expose lies. They'd created a space for genuine change. Our world had tilted back toward justice. It was the kind of ending that felt like a new beginning, and I couldn't wait to see where it led us next. The first light of dawn filtered through my bedroom curtains as I crept downstairs, careful not to wake my girls. My heart was a jumble of excitement and nerves. Today was the day of our first committee meeting at the church, and I still couldn't quite believe I'd agreed to it. But when I thought of my daughters, of every tear they'd shed under those harassing words, I knew I couldn't let fear keep me on the sidelines. In the living room, I found our binders neatly stacked on the coffee table. I picked one up, thumbed through the glossy photos and sharp-edged transcripts, and then set it down. That part of the story was done. Now it was time to build something new. My eldest tumbled down the stairs behind me, hair mussed, eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Morning, Mom. Ready for the big day?" I smiled, pulling her into a quick hug. "Ready as I'll ever be." We crept into the kitchen, where my youngest was already sitting at the table in pajamas, spooning cereal with one hand and fidgeting with a small slip of paper in the other. When I slid a plate of eggs in front of her, she set the paper down. "I wrote some notes," she said, cheeks pink. "Things we should say, like how no kid should ever feel scared at church." My heart swelled. She'd taken her little voice, the one that had once trembled under the market stall's glare, and turned it into words meant to help others. I ruffled her hair. "You're brilliant, kiddo. We'll start with yours." Over breakfast, we rehearsed. My youngest read aloud. "Our church should be a place where everyone feels safe. If we're silent, we're letting bullies win." My eldest's notes were more structured, points about procedure, suggestions for confidentiality, her dreams of a youth outreach to support kids facing family drama. I prompted them to speak up if they felt fear rising, promised to back each word with calm and honesty. By 9, we were dressed and stepping onto the church's front porch again. But this time, it felt different, less like stepping into a battlefield than walking toward a fresh start. I gripped the committee invitation in my hand. Family Support and Mediation Committee, first meeting. Inside, the pastor waited in his office with Mark, the elder, and 2 other church members, one a social worker from the community center. The other, a longtime deacon known for his frank talk and gentle demeanor. They greeted us with warm smiles, genuine this time, and gestured to the circle of folding chairs. As we settled in, I saw the faces of people I'd known for years. Mrs. Price, who ran the Sunday school, Mr. Patel, who always brought extra coffee, even a few of the market ladies who'd cornered my daughter, though their eyes were downcast, and I sensed in them a flicker of remorse. Pastor Jennings cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. This committee is a commitment to ensuring our church remains a place of refuge, not a ground for judgment. Let's begin by sharing our hopes for what this group can achieve." He turned to me first. My stomach fluttered, but I breathed in and let my voice flow. "I want children, like my girls, to know they can come here without fear. That if they're hurting, they have a safe space to speak up without being shamed or belittled." I glanced at my daughters, seated side by side, looking determined. "And I want families to have somewhere neutral to resolve conflicts before they escalate." The social worker nodded. "I think a peer support program would help, pairing families going through tough times with trained mentors." The deacon suggested a clearer protocol for in-church complaints, ensuring they're handled privately. Mark proposed a monthly open forum after service, where sensitive issues could be aired with confidentiality. One by one, ideas bloomed: mediation workshops, youth focus groups, an anonymous feedback box. When it was my eldest's turn, she rose, a tremor in her voice that quickly steadied. "I'd like a student-led group, where teens can talk about things adults might not understand, like meeting a parent's affair children or dealing with grief." She held her head high. "We shouldn't wait for adulthood to have a safe space." I glanced at the pastor's face, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of pride there. We wrapped up with an action plan, draft guidelines, recruit volunteers, schedule a launch date. Before leaving, Mark shook my hand. "This is going to change lives," he said quietly. "Thank you." Back in the sunlight, My daughters and I shared triumphant smiles. We stopped at the same market where the nightmare had begun. My youngest insisted on a celebratory donut, and my eldest grabbed fresh berries. The women at the stalls recognized us and offered gentle waves. No cornering, just warmth. Mom, my youngest said between bites, do you think next week they'll really have the forum? I nodded, smacking a bit of sugar off my lip. Yes, I do, my eldest grinned. Feels good being part of the solution. As we drove home, I reflected on how far we'd come in such a short span, how pain had been our catalyst, how truth had been our weapon, and how now purpose was our path forward. That evening, as we gathered around the kitchen table to plan our family calendar, my eldest opened her laptop and started drafting a flyer for the youth group. My youngest sketched playful logos for the committee. I made a list of names for volunteers. Our home buzzed with creativity and hope. Later, I tucked them in and stood watching as they drifted to sleep, smiles lingering on their faces. The nightmares of market stalls and church bullies had been replaced by dreams of leadership and healing. For the first time in months, the tension in my chest eased. Before turning out the light, I whispered to the darkness, "This is our story now, truth, justice, community, and it's only the beginning." I slipped from the room, closing the door gently. The binders lay in the back of the closet, reminders of the battles we'd fought, but living proof that when you expose darkness to the light, you clear space for something beautiful to grow. And I was ready to tend that garden, side by side with my daughters, every single day. The week after our first meeting unfolded in fits and starts, moments of real progress tangled with unexpected hiccups. Monday morning, I found a stack of anonymous notes slipped under our front door. "Traitor, leave us alone. You had no right." My heart sank for a second, imagining my girls' faces if they'd seen them. I crumpled the notes, flushed them, and told myself, "Not today." By the time they saw me, I was smiling and offering pancakes, keeping the darkness at bay. Tuesday, the church staff sent out a brief bulletin announcing our new committee and inviting families to confidentially share concerns. I watched the open rate spike, lots of clicks, but no real names. It was a start. That afternoon, my eldest came home from school clutching a folded slip. "Will you sign up?" it read, for the youth peer support group. Dozens of names circled around it. She grinned, burst with nervous excitement. Friends, acquaintances, even some kids she barely knew were interested. "They want to talk," she said, voice trembling with hope. "They've seen what happened to us and they don't want it to happen to them." I hugged her tight, fighting tears. Wednesday felt like the longest day. I spent the morning drafting our committee's confidentiality guidelines, how to handle sensitive stories, who could access meeting notes, where to store records. By afternoon, I was back at the market, chatting with vendors I'd known for years. They asked about the church fuss, some with genuine curiosity, others warily, as if I was still that harassed stranger. I told them about our plans: mediation workshops, peer groups, anonymous suggestion boxes. A few women nodded, offered donations of their time. One older lady, Mrs. Reyes, pressed a stack of homemade note cards into my hand and whispered, "Use these for prayer requests. People trust these more than email." I thanked her, feeling the committee's roots dig deeper into the community. Thursday evening was our second committee meeting. 14 people showed up, families with toddlers clutching toys, teenagers with arms folded, a couple who'd been married 50 years. Pastor Jennings led with a prayer, then handed the floor to me. I recapped our progress, the notes under my door, anonymous, no names, the bulletin responses, the youth sign-ups. Then I opened the floor. What are we missing? A mother spoke up. Her son was autistic, bullied at Sunday school for interrupting prayers. A teenage boy talked about his parents' breakup, how no one seemed to know how to help him. A young wife confessed she'd once considered leaving the church after her own family conflict. As they spoke, the room shifted from a place of judgment to one of raw honesty. By the time we wrapped up, we drafted 3 sub-teams: peer support, mediation training, and special needs inclusion. We set deadlines for volunteer training and agreed to pilot a mediation hotline for families. We left energized, clutching our task lists as if they were lifelines. But Friday brought an unexpected challenge: an email from my ex-mother-in-law. Her only surviving child discouraged her from contacting me directly, so she used the church office email. "You've broken our family," it said, "and now you're betraying the church too? You and those girls will pay." I showed it to Pastor Jennings, who frowned and promised swift action. It felt strange to rely on the church's authority, knowing how slow they'd been before. But he immediately blocked her email and called the office to do the same. I appreciated his decisiveness, even as my chest tightened. Saturday morning, the committee's peer support training workshop took place in the fellowship hall. I watched as my eldest co-led a breakout group discussion on what to do when someone judges your family. She guided younger teens through role plays, one pretending to confront a gossip, the other practicing calm responses. My youngest sat with the littler kids, coloring support team badges and distributing juice boxes. I floated between tables, proud and in awe of their courage. By midday, I looked around and realized something important. These weren't perfect people. They stumbled over words, disagreed in heated but respectful ways, but they were trying. They were listening. That afternoon, Pastor Jennings stopped by my side. "You've started something bigger than you know," he said softly. "This is the heart of our community." I nodded, tears threatening, and chased them away with a smile. Sunday, the church was quieter than usual. Rumors had circulated that my ex-in-laws were considering a formal appeal to have me removed from the committee, or even kicked out of membership. I arrived early, clutching the pile of youth group flyers my daughter had designed. As I handed them out, I felt a few cold looks, hands dropping the flyers to avoid touching me. But even that felt less terrifying than the market showdown weeks ago. I greeted each person with a genuine good morning, no bitterness. A handful accepted the flyers, promising to share. Service passed in a blur: scripture, hymns, announcements. When Pastor Jennings called me to the front during the new business segment, my legs quivered. He held the microphone out. "Thanks to Jane and her daughters, we have healing underway in our congregation. Would you share a few words about what's next?" I stepped up, heart in my throat. I glanced at my girls, sitting in the second pew, chins lifted. I took the mic. "We started this because no family should be torn apart by silence and shame. Our next step, starting next week, we'll have after-service circle sessions. They'll be anonymous. You can just show up, have coffee, and talk or listen. No judgment, just a safe space." Some heads nodded. I saw a few eyes glisten. "If you need us, we'll be there. That's our promise." I handed the mic back and took a steadying breath. After service, the crowd filed out. I braced for more cold shoulders, but instead, a line formed. A young mother handed me a tissue-stained note. "Thank you." A teenage boy, red-eyed, stood next. I thought my family was alone. "I'm going to come next Sunday." A couple of the market vendors gave me hugs. Even Mrs. Caldwell, the woman who'd cornered my youngest, approached slowly, head bowed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was wrong." I nodded, too choked up to speak. My eldest slipped her arm through mine, and we walked out together, my youngest skipping ahead, collecting someone's dropped bulletin. That night, I tucked the girls into bed and lingered, watching their steady breathing. The committee's binders lay in my room, new ones, filled with plans and schedules, not betrayals. I felt the weight of responsibility in my chest. We'd come so far, but the work would never be finished. Families would keep having conflicts, rumors would still fly. Church politics would never fully disappear. But every time I looked at those girls, I remembered why we'd started, to protect them, and every other child who deserved safety and respect. I whispered into the dark, "Tomorrow, we start those circle sessions." And as I turned out the light, I felt, for the first time in months, a deep, steady peace. We weren't just survivors of someone else's lies, we were architects of something new. A community reborn, stone by honest stone. And I knew that, together, we could keep building. The sun rose on the morning of our first circle session, and with it came a promise of renewal. I woke before my daughters, heart thudding with anticipation rather than dread. Today would be the first time families could sit together, parents, children, grandparents, without fear of judgment, to speak their truths and find support. It felt monumental. I slipped into the kitchen and found my eldest there already, pouring coffee. She looked up and smiled. "Ready?" I nodded, and together we set out the last-minute details. Fresh muffins from the bakery down the street, extra chairs, name tags for those who wanted them. My youngest arranged a small basket of crayons and paper for little ones. The church hall, once stiff and formal, had been transformed with potted ferns and string lights, lending it warmth and openness. By 10 o'clock, people trickled in. Some faces were familiar. The autistic boy's mother with her gentle smile, Mrs. Ray's clutching her prayer note cards. Others were new, a young father with trembling shoulders, a grandmother whose stern facade cracked the moment she spotted us. My daughters and I greeted each newcomer as they passed through the door, offering coffee or juice with genuine kindness. No one hesitated to take a cup. Pastor Jennings opened with a brief welcome, then turned the floor over to me. I glanced at my girls, already seated alongside other teens who'd signed up. My eldest stood, cleared her throat, and shared her story. She spoke of the market stall incident, the binders, the committee. But more than that, she spoke of how lost and hurt she'd felt, and how finding a safe space had changed everything. When she finished, her voice steady and eyes bright, the room was hushed. I saw a few tears glisten. That afternoon, the circle broke into small groups. I watched as a father confessed shame over a failed business, leaving his family on the brink, and how he'd been too proud to ask for help. Across the room, a teenager shared how moving schools had made her feel invisible, and how small acts of kindness could be life-changing. One group worked through role plays for confronting gossip calmly, another drafted an anonymous hotline script. My youngest, cheeks flushed with excitement, led the children in drawing safe space posters, each with simple pledges. "I will listen. I will not judge. I will help." By the time the session closed, the hall buzzed with quiet hope. People lingered to exchange numbers, to hug, to promise, "See you next week." I felt a deep swelling of pride and relief. This was exactly what we'd set out to build: connection, compassion, community. That evening, I tucked my daughters into bed and sat beside them, the echoes of laughter and earnest conversation still warm in my chest. My eldest yawned. "Mom, Do you think this will keep going? I mean, really keep going? I smiled and brushed her hair back. With the way people showed up today? Yes, this is bigger than any of us. We've laid the foundation. Now it's up to all of us to keep it strong. She snuggled under the covers, eyes already fluttering closed. My youngest sat up, tugging my sleeve. I made a new friend today, she whispered. She said she felt safe for the first time in a long time. My heart clenched with joy. That's wonderful, sweetie. As I turned off the light, I glanced at the small stack of binders tucked away in the closet, remnants of our struggle and symbols of a past we'd overcome. Tonight, I didn't feel anger or bitterness. Instead, I felt grounded in purpose. The binders had done their work, but these conversations, this network of care, that was the lasting legacy. Over the next weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. Sunday mornings were no longer fraught with tension, but filled with possibilities. The committee's subteams met routinely. The youth group grew in membership. The mediation hotline fielded its first call, which we handled with care and confidentiality. My daughters volunteered as peer mentors, and I watched them grow in confidence and empathy. Their trauma transformed into strength. One crisp autumn evening, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at a regional church conference on healing through truth and community. At first, I hesitated. Public speaking had never been my comfort zone. But then, I thought of every family shattered by secrets, every child scared of judgmental stares. I accepted. Standing before a hall of hundreds of church leaders from surrounding towns, I shared our story, raw and unvarnished. I showed snapshots of our circle sessions, read excerpts from anonymous testimonials, and outlined our model for peer support. When I finished, the applause was immediate and heartfelt. I scanned the crowd and noticed several pastors nodding, some wiping tears. In that moment, I realized our small church's experience was resonating far beyond our walls. Returning home, I felt the weight of what we'd built, no longer contained in one hall, one community, but rippling outward. My daughters greeted me at the door, bursting with questions and excitement. They'd been fielding emails from teens in neighboring towns wanting to start their own circles. In the months that followed, our model was adopted by two nearby churches, each customizing it to their communities. We exchanged resources and stories, forging a network of support I'd never imagined possible. One Sunday, as we sat in our home's living room, tea steaming on the table, binders of committee plans open, laughter echoing, I looked at my girls and saw not the frightened children cornered by judgment, but two leaders, two hopes for tomorrow. And I knew that beyond every painful chapter lay the chance to write something better. Our journey had begun with confrontation, exposing lies, demanding accountability, but it transformed into creation. Of trust, of understanding, of a safe harbor for those in need. It was the truth made real, shaped by action, sealed by compassion. And though the binders remained a reminder of how things once were, they were now just artifacts of a past that propelled us forward into a future defined by healing and community. This was the end of one story and the start of so many others.